Military members, what is the most embarrassing "this guy won't make it through basics" story you have? Story 1. One dude had a total Homer Simpson moment. Was 19 and his mommy did his laundry at home, so he had no clue how to do laundry. We said, put your greens in one and whites in the other, whites being the PT clothes, white shirt and gray shorts. So being a genius, he throws his brand new white-red hoodie in with the whites and is stunned to find all his PT clothes are pink. As we all laugh our butts off, because he was also a rude, entitled rich butthole, so we let him swing for a lot of his stupidity. Next morning, 500 troops form up in front of the base RSM for Group PT, and from hundreds of meters away, he points to Poopface in the pink shirt. "You," he shouts. He has to march up to the RSM and explain his idiocy, then yells at our core staff for not sorting him out. After the staff getting jacked up by the RSM, they decided to pay him lots of extra personal attention from then on. He ended up releasing from the military. That is too funny. I can't even imagine the look on the guy's face when he realized he had turned all his PT clothes pink. And to make matters worse, he had to face the RSM with his embarrassing mistake. It sounds like he really learned his lesson the hard way. But hey, we all make silly mistakes from time to time, right? Story 2. Live grenade training is easy as pie. It's throwing a grenade. Except for M. Now at this stage of training, M had made a bad name for himself, and no one wanted to be near him on any live fire training for various reasons. So we are sitting in a bunker-type building all waiting our turn when M's name is called. We all sit there knowing it's going to be a disaster when we hear, "For Pete's sake, throw it!" A thump, then someone being beaten. It turns out when M pulled the pin, he had held the grenade the wrong way round, and the fly-off level shot up instantly. He then froze, requiring the instructor to grab the grenade off him, throw it, then pull him down on the ground behind cover. The instructor was mega ticked off at this stage and beat the daylights out of him. 2 days later, he was transferred out of the infantry and joined the RLC to stack blankets. Never easy to hear about someone struggling in a difficult situation, especially in a high-pressure environment like military training. It's unfortunate that M had already made a bad name for himself and faced additional pressure during the live grenade training. However, it's disheartening to hear that the instructor resorted to violence as a means of discipline. It's important to remember that everyone deserves to be treated with respect and dignity, even in difficult situations. It's good to hear that M was transferred to a different role, where he could hopefully thrive and excel. Story 3. This guy not only made it through basics, he somehow got himself deployed to Afghanistan too. I have no idea how he did it. He was the laziest slacker I have ever met in my life. When we first arrived at camp, we were put in rooms of 4 people, and the whole first month he slept in his sleeping bag because he didn't want to bother with having to change his sheets, or he didn't know how to. Now Afghanistan during summer is really hot, and this guy never showered, so you can imagine the smell of that sleeping bag. Our squad leader literally had to sit down with him and explain the importance of hygiene when you live so close with other people. Diseases spread like wildfire when they first arrived. That didn't change much, though. He'd just sit in his sleeping bag in all his free time, eating candy and jerking off. We heard him jerking off during nighttime after lights were out, and I swear he never left the room afterwards to clean himself up. I've no idea where his jazz ended up. Probably inside his sleeping bag. He'd also put his used chewing tobacco under his pillow when he finished. One day, me and these other 2 guys were so fed up with his stank, one of us dragged him to the showers, while the 2 of us left, put on some gloves, and took the sleeping bag outside to light it on fire. When we were out on our posts around the camp working, he disappeared to go to the bathroom and would be gone for close to an hour every time. He was probably jerking off in there too. If mortars started hitting close to camp, he completely freaked out and had no idea what to do. What a dumb butt. The officer who decided he was good enough to go overseas is also a dumb guy. Okay, let me just start by saying that this story is both hilarious and disturbing at the same time. I get it, basic training is tough, and not everyone is cut out for it, but this guy takes the cake. How on earth did he manage to get deployed to Afghanistan? The best part of this whole story has to be when the other guy finally had enough and dragged him to the showers while they burned his sleeping bag outside. Talk about tough love. Story 4. Sailor here had a guy in basic whose rate was to be a nuclear engineer. This kid was unstable, weird, and I did not trust him to maintain a nuclear-powered anything. He would have random breakdowns and meltdowns, pun intended, randomly, just all around a strange guy. He definitely seemed like he had a form of autism. It's not like he could help it, and I'm not making fun of him for a mental condition that he possibly could have had, but I don't think he belonged in a military environment. Story 5. We were out at the range doing basic rifle marksmanship. It's amazing how little time you're given to do simple things like go to the bathroom. So we are in the middle of doing live fire, and one of the guys jumps up out of his foxhole and books it for the bathroom. Everyone is still firing. I don't think I've ever seen a drill sergeant move so fast to discipline a soldier. I'm surprised she didn't knock over the porta potty. Story 6. A friend that's in the Air Force told me about how his superior would hardcore mess with this one kid. Off the top of my head, he told me about when this kid was having to do latrine duty when he decided to mess with him on this day. The superior took a melted Snickers bar and placed or smeared it on a toilet. The guy yells for the kid to come over to chew him out about how he's doing a crappy job at cleaning. Kid argues that the brown sludge does not look like doo-doo. Superior challenges the kid's question and takes a swab of it with his finger, then tastes it. The kid passed out. Story 7. So, this is my favorite Army story to tell. It's the best thing in the world, and I wish I could have had it on video. Army Basic have a roster number, at least my group did, so they either call us by last name or roster number. I remember this guy's roster number because of this story, so we'll call him that. This is a story of 250. We were out doing our land navigation course, and it has 2 parts, a day land nav and a night land nav. During the night phase, 250 were out trying to navigate to his points with his partner. He, for some reason, felt it would be a good idea to take off his cover, hat. Well, the drill sergeants are like ninjas in this area. They'll straight up materialize from behind the tree just to surprise you with a, "You lost, Private?" 250 was spotted by a drill sergeant, and his lack of cover was noticed. Drill sergeant calls out, "Private, where the frick is your cover?" Poor, silly 250 calls back, "I left it at your mama's house." Drill sergeant gets insta-ticked off. Yells back, "What did you just say?" 250, that crazy kid, didn't catch on to the unfolding plot. So he yells back, "I said, left it at your mama's house." For the next month, that particular drill sergeant would hunt for him in the formations. You could feel 250's will to live deflate every time we heard, "Hey, 250, where you at?" He'd have to answer, "Here, drill sergeant," and then prepare for as many push-ups and V-ups as the rules would allow. 250 ended up making it through his ordeal. I like to think he's out there somewhere now and doing the same thing, harassing new soldiers who speak before they think like he did. I see why this is your favorite Army story to tell. It's definitely seeming like one of those moments that sticks with you forever. It's also a great reminder of the importance of thinking before speaking, especially in a high-pressure situation like basic training. It's easy to get caught up in the moment and say something you regret later. Story 8. German military 20 years ago had a draft. I was drafted. I wear thick glasses, -9 dioptrine. German military didn't want me, despite me coming with bulletproof eyes. They've explained to me that I wouldn't be able to see much if my glasses got knocked off during duty. I told them that while I wouldn't be able to make out the flag signs, I would be able to see the soldiers wearing them, so I'd shoot everybody, resulting in me being the last survivor, which in turn would result in my side having won the engagement. They didn't find it as funny as I did. Story 9. This guy and his girlfriend joined at the same time, together forever, placed in separate companies. Couple weeks into basic, he comes up to formation all excited, "I'ma be a daddy." Story 10. I had just arrived at Great Lakes for boot camp. This was in 1991, and we are standing in line for our first introduction to what is known in the military as Operation Golden Flow, or our first urinalysis test. As I'm standing in a very long line and tip-tapping around because I have to pee so much, a guy standing behind me tapped me on the shoulder and asked what we are waiting for. I look at him and tell him, "A urinalysis." He looks at me and asks me what a urinalysis is. So I tell him to see who has taken any drugs recently. He nods, shrugs, and says, "Well, I guess I shouldn't have smoked that crack last night." He was serious. That's when I knew he wouldn't make it through boot camp. Now, he officially wasn't fired that first day, but about 2 weeks later when his results came back, he was. So yes, you can say that he was fired that first day, but had to suffer for a few weeks until officially let go. Oh, the things people will say when they don't realize the gravity of the situation they're in. This story about the guy who smoked crack the night before his urinalysis is both funny and sad. I can't help but chuckle at his nonchalant attitude about the whole thing, but at the same time, it's clear he didn't fully understand the consequences of his actions. It's a shame that he wasn't able to make it through boot camp, but it's also understandable why they have such strict drug policies in the military. Story 11. We took our first physical training evaluation like 4 days into basic, and everyone did pretty awful due to stress and a crummy illness that got spread around right after we got there. But one girl only managed to do 2 sit-ups and half a push-up before she collapsed. She inexplicably red-rummed the run, but we all figured she'd get kicked out for her push-up sit-up sucking. They stuck her on some remedial physical training program, and she actually wound up as an honor graduate. Story 12. There was one guy who wanted out after about 2 days. About one halfway through, we were going to start live firing our weapons, zeroing them, and he said he was going to shoot himself in the foot. Was gone the next day, so I guess he got what he wished. Story 13. I have 2. The first was a 17-year-old kid who was in my platoon in boot camp. For the first couple of days, he was the loudest, most obnoxious kid in the platoon. He wasted no opportunity to tell us what a bad butt he was. On the day our real drill instructors came on deck, in Marine Corps boot camp, you spend the first couple of days with recently graduated DIs who are much more easygoing than your actual DIs. He pounded on our senior drill instructor's door in tears, shouting something like, "Sir, this recruit isn't ready for Marine Corps boot camp. Please, sir, this recruit is only 17 years old." He spent the next 2 days spending all day sitting on the floor facing a mirror until the MPs came on deck, handcuffed him, and dragged them away crying and screaming. Years later, I rented out a room in my house to an Air Force kid who had no idea how to use a washing machine, spent all of his downtime playing World of Warcraft, and had no idea how to cook, so would take out for every single meal. He'd look at me like I was a wizard when I'd come home from the grocery store with fruits and vegetables. Once, while I was cooking dinner, he came into the kitchen and out of nowhere said something like, "You know, my dong is bigger than yours, right?" I think I punched him. He ended up moving out not long after. That was about 10 years ago, and the last I heard, he developed diabetes in no small part because of his terrible diet. Sounds like the 17-year-old kid had a rough start, but couldn't handle the real drill instructors when they arrived. As for the Air Force kid you rented a room to, it's funny how different people can be when it comes to everyday skills, like cooking and doing laundry. It's also unfortunate that his diet led to his health issues like diabetes. These stories are a good reminder to always try to be open-minded and respectful of others, even in high-pressure situations. Story 14. We had one guy in our training division that, when issued 2 left boots, wore them. Did not say a thing, just kept on thinking it was normal to have 2 boots the same. Got picked up on parade one morning as to why he was wearing them. Was it a joke? Why has he not asked the question? He didn't make it through. Story 15. In formation marching somewhere, it's pretty simple. Don't talk, look forward, step when you're supposed to. I was in the very front, and all of a sudden I hear, "Skunk!" followed by, "Where the frick are you going? Flight halt!" This kid broke formation to chase a skunk. No, I have no idea why. Story 16. Not necessarily really embarrassing, but I had 2 in my platoon that I can remember. There was a relatively older guy, I would say maybe late 30s, that was dumber than a bag of rocks. I specifically remember one day before we went out to the grenade range, they had everybody line up and throw dummy grenades to make sure people knew how to do it. Well, this guy wound up like he was pitching at the World Series and threw it like 5 feet at the most. The drill sergeant had this, "Oh, heck no," look on his face, and thus ended his grenade throwing career. There was also a kid who completed basic and stole a video game from the PX on Family Day and got recycled. Story 17. Was going through that one course where you have to walk across the different ropes from tower to tower. The first one, you walk on a single rope while holding 2 ropes for support. The next, you walked across a rope while holding to 1 rope, and the last, you had to sort of belly crawl across a single rope. Bear with me. I know I'm doing a crappy job of painting a picture, but anyways, this was during the last 3 weeks of basic. She was that one person in the group that couldn't follow the simplest instruction, and it shocked nearly everyone she made it that far. She couldn't figure out how to do the last rope crawl, despite the instructor repeating how to hold on to it. She made it maybe 4 feet out and fell, breaking her leg in 3 places. Then in AIT, there was a guy who fell so hard behind on a run, he got lost. Ended up falling in with another group he thought was our company that was way behind us. Then fell behind them and couldn't figure out how to get back to the barracks. The drill sergeants ended up driving around base 4 hours looking for him after he was discovered missing, and last anyone saw him, he was running behind us. If I recall correctly, they found him leaving Burger King. Oh man, these stories are something else. I can only imagine how frustrating it must have been for the instructors dealing with these trainees. It's amazing how some people can make it that far in basic training without being able to follow simple instructions. Story 18. Marine Corps Recruit Depot, Paris Island, 2011. Now you should know there's basically 2 types of recruits, guys who are Marine material and guys who join so that people will take them seriously for the first time in their lives. They always get some extra treatment. This one skinny Indian kid looked like he couldn't be more than 100 pounds. He was a drill instructor's favorite because he'd go stress level 100 at the slightest bit of pressure. One day, a drill instructor just made him yell until he was crying, and then until he passed out. Just stood there screaming, "Aye, sir," until he went down. He graduated with us 12 weeks later. Story 19. On the second day of our basic, we all had to go up to sick bay and get a checkup, bringing along any prescribed medications that you had. One guy brought all his antipsychotic meds with him to show to the medical officer. We never saw him again. How that slipped through the pre-joining medical has always baffled me. Story 20. Not my story, my brother's. My bro went through basic of MCRD Paris Island a few years ago. They had one particular guy in his platoon that had been kinda moody the whole time, more sullen than the rest of them. A few days after they got to the firing range to learn to shoot, he was caught trying to sneak 5 rounds of live ammo away from the range, hid them in the fingers of his gloves, got kicked out immediately, dishonorable. General consensus amongst the platoon was that the dude had been planning to end the lives of several of the drill instructors and then end his own life. Story 21. Military boot camp is depressingly hard to fail. You would not believe the absolute turds that end up making it, though sometimes they did get recycled a few times before that point. Source, USMC Vet. Story 22. Kid had his phone for the first 2 months of basic. Drill sergeants never caught wind until one day he literally left his wall locker open, literally just hanging open with his phone sitting right out. He then sits there with a poop-eating grin as all 200-something members of our company get the dog poop smoked out of us, and he stands there and watches. Needless to say, before he got kicked out, his platoon beat the everlasting poop out of him. Story 23. In basic training, my camp was split into 4 companies. 2 of these companies were designed to train soldiers joining the technical trades of the British Army, such as electricians, engineers, and specialists. Basic training for most people is an attendance course, so you wake up in the morning, get messed around during the day, and then back to bed. Repeat for 6 months. Most people found the easier part from recruit. Recruit was a complete turbo-mong. Recruit didn't shower. After complaining to their training team, the staff asked him to shower, ignored the training team until they had to force him under a shower. We had to have a member of staff watch us shower in the morning to make sure he did it properly. Recruit once ran down the platoon lines exclaiming he had waterproofed his water bottle. Recruit fell over in the corner of his bed and knocked himself out clean. Recruit once took a poop so hard he passed out on the toilet. Rumor has it that he was found on the floor of the toilet with poop all up the wall. We had to clean this. Recruit forgot his ammunition on a section attack. Honestly, this kid was a complete mong. He is now a serving Royal Engineer. He builds bridges for tanks. I don't know how well he is getting on now, though. It's hard not to feel a mix of emotions when hearing about recruits' experiences in basic training. On one hand, it's easy to laugh and shake your head at the absurdity of his antics, waterproofing a water bottle, falling over and knocking himself out, passing out on the toilet. It all sounds like something out of a comedy sketch. But on the other hand, it's also a bit sad to think about how much he struggled with even the most basic aspects of training. The fact that he had to be watched while showering and forgot his ammunition during a section attack suggests that he was really struggling to keep up with the demands of the program. I can only hope that he found his footing as a serving Royal Engineer and is able to contribute to the military in a meaningful way. Story 24. So, military entrance training has two phases: basic and then advanced individual training, where you learn your job. Job training is still pretty strict, but it's not as bad as basic. We had this dude who would constantly meet fat women on Tinder to do it with them. He was about 6'1" and 150 pounds. These women were like 300 plus. Like once a week, he'd bring a fatty home. You aren't allowed to bring girls to the barracks, or do anything with them at all during training. He got caught eventually and made up a story that he wanted to end his life so he could get discharged.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.